In the sweltering summer of 1960, a courtroom in Louisiana became the stage for a drama that would forever alter the course of country music. Freddy Fender, known to the world later by that name, but once Baldemar Huerta, stood defiant in a seat that many would say marked the beginning of a long, painful journey. Today, we're about to peel back the layers of a man whose story of struggle and redemption still echoes in every note he ever sang. Before the name Freddy Fender became synonymous with resilience and soulful ballads, Baldemar Huerta was a small-town dreamer born to migrant workers in the dusty fringes of San Bonito, Texas. Born in 1937, life had already dealt him a hard hand. As a young boy, he toiled under the scorching sun in tomato fields, his days filled with labor and long hours, yet his evenings brought solace, a voice so pure and powerful it turned heads on local radio. By age 10, his humble beginnings had already seeded the spark of a future that would one day light up the nation. As the 1950s rolled in, a musical revolution was underway and young Baldemar embraced change. Reinventing himself as Freddy Fender, a nod to his favorite guitar brand and a flashy emblem adorning his classic Chevrolet, he set out to redefine his destiny. His first breakthrough came with the modest hit "Wasted Days and Wasted Nights," a song that began to ripple across the local charts and packed Texas and Louisiana clubs with enthusiastic crowds. Success was on the horizon, and for a moment it seemed that nothing could stop this rising star. Yet, in the wild, unpredictable landscape of early rock and roll and country music, fame was as much a burden as it was a blessing. The glittering promise of the stage and the roar of adoring fans came with unseen pitfalls, long, exhausting tours, the relentless grind of nightly performances, and the creeping pressures of a system not always kind to a Mexican-American artist. In May of 1960, the forces of fate aligned in a way that no one could have foreseen. A routine traffic stop on a humid night just outside Baton Rouge unraveled everything. A small cache of marijuana cigarettes, barely enough to spark a flame, became the spark that set off a chain reaction, a reaction fanned by prejudice and draconian laws of the era. For a musician who had once enchanted audiences, the discovery of those few illicit cigarettes was interpreted as a grave threat. Critics and officials alike saw in him not just a talented artist, but a symbol of defiance in an era of segregation and suspicion. The arrest sent shockwaves across the region. Headlines painted him as a Mexican troublemaker, conveniently ignoring the service he rendered to his country and the joy his songs brought to so many. And so, in a verdict that stunned the community, Freddy Fender's burgeoning career was halted, nearly 4 years behind bars, at the infamous Angola State Prison, known to many as the Farm. Angola, a sprawling 1-800-0-acre complex built upon a dark past, was notorious for its brutal conditions and unyielding discipline. On his first day, stripped of his identity and reduced to nothing more than an inmate number, Fender entered a world where hope was a scarce commodity. The transformation from celebrated performer to nameless laborer was jarring. Gone were the days of vibrant concert halls and ecstatic crowds. Instead, he was thrust into a relentless cycle of 10-hour shifts in the cotton fields under the unremitting Louisiana sun, supervised by guards on horseback and a system designed to break even the hardest of spirits. Yet even in the depths of despair, a familiar spark flickered within him. As he labored day after day, the haunting strains of his inner voice began to take shape. In the midst of the oppressive heat and the harsh clatter of daily routines, Freddy Fender found solace in song. It started quietly, a gentle hum echoing off the concrete walls of his cell, and soon those harmonies drew the attention of fellow inmates and even a few sympathetic guards. His voice, raw and full of lived experience, turned the bleak prison yard into an unexpected sanctuary of music. Within the grim confines of Angola, Fender's world was transformed. The prison band, a motley crew of forgotten souls and musical hopefuls, became his unlikely haven. He wasn't performing for sold-out stadiums now. He was singing for hardened men and weary guards, each performance an act of defiance against the circumstances that sought to crush him. In cramped corners of the prison chapel and during stolen moments in the yard, Fender began to pen new songs, lyrics scrawled on scraps of paper, the margins of old magazines, even on torn pieces of toilet paper. Each line was imbued with the pain of isolation, the bitter taste of injustice, and the resilient hope that tomorrow might bring redemption. His days in Angola were a study in contrasts. On one hand, every moment was a struggle for survival, a fight against the physical toll of hard labor and the emotional isolation of being cut off from the family he loved. His wife and children, left to navigate a world that now judged them by association, endured their own hardships. Neighbors whispered, and even relatives could not erase the stigma attached to having a convicted man in the family. The pain was palpable. Every letter from home brought both a ray of hope and a sting of sorrow. Yet, amidst that suffering, Fender's spirit was quietly evolving. Behind bars, his musical soul was being tempered by hardship. The long, endless nights in his cell became sessions of soul-searching and creative exploration. He listened intently as fellow inmates, veterans of life's rougher roads, shared their stories through impromptu jam sessions. There was the blues guitarist whose mournful licks narrated decades of loss, the piano-playing convict who wove complex jazz harmonies into a tapestry of resilience, and even a grizzled choir director whose deep baritone recitations lent a spiritual weight to every note. These interactions didn't just fill the void of isolation. They enriched his musical repertoire and deepened his understanding of the power of song. As the years ticked by, Fender's songwriting matured in ways that the outside world could scarcely have imagined. Gone were the simple, catchy refrains of his early hits, replaced instead by poignant narratives of life behind bars. He wrote of the inmate who dreamt of freedom, the old-timer too frightened to leave, and even the sympathetic guard whose quiet smiles masked a hidden humanity. Every song was a testament to the trials he'd endured and the lessons learned in the relentless forge of Angola's penitentiary life. Yet life in prison wasn't solely a tale of despair. Amid the daily grind, small moments of grace emerged, secret privileges granted by a warden who recognized talent, brief interludes in the chapel where music was allowed to bloom, and even clandestine performances that united inmates and guards in a shared moment of beauty. These occasions, though rare, provided Fender with the inspiration to believe that his art could transcend the bleakness of his surroundings. His voice, now weathered and soulful, carried the weight of experience. Every note was a reminder that even in the darkest times, art could offer a glimmer of hope. As 1963 approached, the prison walls began to feel less like a tomb and more like a crucible where a once unpolished diamond was being honed to perfection. Fender's final days behind bars were spent perfecting the style that would later define his comeback, a seamless fusion of country twang and Latin warmth, enriched by the pain and wisdom that only hardship can bestow. It was during one particularly moving Christmas performance, in the dim light of a converted maintenance shed the inmates had dubbed the warehouse, that he debuted a new song, a ballad that spoke of lost years and the promise of new beginnings. The haunting melody and soulful lyrics resonated deeply, even among those who had once dismissed him as nothing more than a troubled troublemaker. Finally, in the spring of 1963, the day of reckoning arrived. With a heavy heart and a head full of songs yet to be sung, Freddy Fender stepped through the towering gates of Angola for the final time. Armed with nothing more than a battered guitar, a few personal belongings in a cardboard box, and a mind teeming with melodies born of anguish and hope, he returned to a world that had long moved on without him. The America he encountered was transformed. The Beatles were redefining pop, the folk revival was in full swing, and the country music scene was evolving in ways that felt both alien and familiar. Back in San Bonito, the reunion with his family was bittersweet. His wife, who had been forced to fend for the family at a local diner, greeted him with both relief and sorrow, while his children, now older and bearing the scars of his absence, eyed him with a mixture of pride and pity. The local clubs that had once clamored for his performances now turned him away, fearful of the notoriety that came with a prison record. Even old friends in the music industry hesitated to rekindle ties with the man who had once been a beacon of promise. Yet, in the face of rejection, Fender clung to the lessons that Angola had ingrained in him: humility, perseverance, and an unwavering belief in the power of his music. Determined to reclaim his place in the world, he took any gig he could find, playing in seedy dive bars, on street corners under starlit skies, and at community gatherings where the only ticket was a shared love for real, honest music. By day, he worked a modest job fixing cars at a local garage, each spark from the engine a reminder of a past life. By night, he poured his soul into songs that spoke of redemption, loss, and the transformative power of second chances. In his solitary hours, he would retreat to a cramped garage apartment where the thin walls carried his practice sessions into the quiet streets, and local teens would gather, unknowingly witnessing the rebirth of a musical legend. Then in 1974, fate took another unexpected turn. In a dimly lit bar in San Antonio, a seasoned producer, known for his knack for spotting raw, unrefined talent, heard Fender sing with a passion that defied his troubled past. The producer, a man with his own history of setbacks and comebacks, recognized that here was a voice that had been sculpted by life's harshest realities. He persuaded Fender to record a bilingual version of a timeless hit, a song that would serve as the catalyst for his long-awaited return to the charts. In one electrifying session, filled with the ghosts of Angola and the promise of redemption, Fender's reimagined melody bridged the gap between English and Spanish, between old wounds and new beginnings. The single's release in early 1975 was nothing short of a revelation. Overnight, the very sound that had once been silenced by scandal now soared to #1 on both country and pop charts. The lyrics, once tainted by the bitterness of lost time, now resonated with a raw sincerity that captivated audiences nationwide. Every note of "Before the Next Teardrop Falls" carried the weight of a man who had been broken only to rebuild himself from the ruins. A sound that transcended the confines of genre and spoke to the universal language of survival. In the months and years that followed, Freddy Fender's comeback defied expectations. Award after award, radio airplay after radio airplay, his story became an emblem of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost. Yet even as the accolades poured in and his name once again graced the marquee of country music, Fender never shied away from the shadow of his past. In interviews and on stage, he recounted the brutal lessons learned in Angola, the long days in the cotton fields, the stolen moments of musical inspiration in a dark cell, and the bittersweet memories of a family strained by his absence. His honesty resonated with fans and fellow musicians alike, turning him into not only a celebrated artist, but also a mentor and a symbol of genuine transformation. Freddy's influence extended far beyond the charts. He dedicated himself to causes close to his heart, advocating for prison reform, offering support to young musicians facing similar struggles, and even inviting former inmates to join him on stage for impromptu performances. Each concert was a tribute to those dark days that had forged him into the man he had become, a living testament to the idea that the harshest trials can yield the most profound art. As we reflect on the extraordinary journey of Freddy Fender, from a young boy picking tomatoes under the Texas sun, to a vibrant performer captivating small-town radio, to a man reshaped by the crucible of Angola's brutal confinement, and finally to a triumphant icon of redemption, we are reminded that every setback carries within it the seeds of a greater comeback. His story, filled with heartbreak, struggle, and ultimately rebirth, speaks to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of music as both a refuge and a means of transformation. Freddy Fender's life reminds us that the echoes of our darkest moments can give rise to the most luminous melodies. His journey is a poignant narrative of how the fires of adversity can refine raw talent into something immortal. The soulful blend of country twang with Latin rhythm, the seamless transition between sorrow and hope, and the unwavering authenticity in every lyric continue to inspire generations long after the echoes of his past have faded. So if you've ever felt that the weight of your own struggles might keep you from ever finding your voice again, remember the legacy of Freddy Fender, a man who emerged from the depths of despair to become one of country music's most compelling storytellers. His voice, born from hardship and tempered by grace, will forever remind us that every chapter of our lives, no matter how dark, has the potential to lead us to a brighter, more profound future. If you found this deep dive into the turbulent yet inspiring life of Freddy Fender as moving as we did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Here on Southern Sound, we're committed to unearthing the untold stories of music's greatest legends. Stories that remind us that sometimes the most haunting of pasts can be the very foundation upon which a legacy is built.